What's going to happen to us now?
I think we'll be shot.
I would prefer to be executed. We are all ready to meet our God, now that we are defeated. Outside that barrack wall, the people who we have tried to emancipate have demonstrated nothing but hatred and contempt for us. We would be better off dead, as life would be a torture. Better to say a decade of the Rosary for those who have fought in the cause for Irish freedom, past, present, and future generations. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death.
Cén fá gur gcuirimid na bláhanna seo. Na mágad. Tá sé táchtach a bheith brodúil as an héin. As ar maile agus ar dír. Crán úla chur. Na fáil sé ar gearra. Bláhanna chur. Do theach agus an timplachta jausú. Céad bliain ó hain. Chrid grúpa fear misnúil son na tíre seo agus bhásig siad dá bhar. Bhí siad réig a saoil a ébert son na saoirse. Seo fuair dír. Ba chóir measa bheith againn an tír agus ar danga.
Rugó Con Colbert in 1888 I món léana gan dé Limrí cé gur bhógan a Windsor go dtí an sléivan nuair a bhí sé óg. Clán mór a bhí an trí chuine dhéag agus bhása an bháthar go hóg mar sin bhí an tathair gá dógeall agus cha Colbert, cha Con Colbert cuid bha gá óge le ansín I sean rólan gá bhhar sin.
Bhí uncle leis amach leis na fíníní I 1867 agus ar hebh a bhhar mac Dearmadta benam dóibh son Peter son gníomhartí gánaí a rudí ar nás cogan na talún agus mar sin le éon rud náisiúnach so bhí an náisiúnachas ann agus macálaí den poblachtánaachas go má tríd na fíníní nuair bhí sé ag fásta níos. Agus an taobh sin na limanach bhí neart gailge fós á Lord agus ba chuoin leis chuaigh sé Weimar.
Wog Con Colbert go blá clia nuair bhí sé sna déige. Chhlaich sé páirte gan na gaige agus chó sé isteach I gréibh an chétíní I mná clia. Gomininic chó a daine isteach I gan na gaige agus casú daine ar an sin a ra síimeach bíúháin san gaige chu rudí níos leithne agus a bhí go ra an gaige táhachtach mar chuid sa chúis níos leithne. Nar leor bheith caint ar chuirsaí teangan gur heasta airú polatú gur heasta neamsbláchas na tíre agus bhí grúpaí mar bhrárachas na poblachta gníomhach sa ganra I gcíre an nearcha siúd a chur chun cín.
Agraíocht rúnda réamhláideach a bhí amráithreachas phoblacht na héireann, a bhí díirithe tríd an lámhláidir ar phoblacht éireannach a bhaint amach. I rinne tréimhse seo, dhearg an bráithreachas ar grúpaí cultúrtha, ar nós conan na Gaeilge agus cumann luachlas Gael. Agraíochtaí a bhí thar a bheith arúnach chun bail nua a chláthir.
Bhí Colbert gníomhach an inse chóir agus bhí cuid bhá daine sa geantar sin a bhí bail leis agus bhí sásta páirteach lecha sna himachtaí a bhí ar bunaige. Ach san nám céanna bhí barrack ag arm na Breton an sin mar sin bhí cuid bhá saidúirí, clán na saidúirí sin, daine bhí a breathan na saidúirí sin, mar sin bhí an dá héamháin I measc muintear inse chóir daine a bheach ar héamh Colbert agus daine bheach ar a taobh eile ar fad.
What are you hanging around with those Sinn Féin bastards for, huh?
Good shot.
Come on, lads. God save the king.
A meeting of boys will be held on Monday next at 34 Camden Street to form a National Boys Brigade. The brigade will be managed by the boys themselves on national non-party lines. One of the objects of the new society will be the teaching of the national language and history. Any boy who wishes to work for Ireland is invited to be present at 8 o'clock.
This is a time, late 19th, early 20th century, is the time of a rise of uniformed youth groups in Europe. And the Fianna were instigated by Countess Markievicz, and she was particularly concerned about British uniformed youth groups operating in Ireland and getting a lot of support, official support, say from the Lord Lieutenant. And so what she wanted to do was counteract the Boys Brigade and the Boy Scouts in Ireland. She was concerned that Irish boys, who should be focused on Irish organisations, were getting sucked into these imperialist organisations.
The Boy Scouts in the early 1900s would very much have been a recruiting ground for the British Army, and they were very much patronised by the pro-British loyalist establishment in Dublin. The Countess Markievicz was moving in nationalist circles, militant nationalist circles in Dublin at the time, and she met Bulmer Hobson. Now, Bulmer Hobson was a Northern Republican from a Quaker background, and he had had a group in Belfast called na Fianna Éireann in 1902, which was more of a hurling club, but basically, again, for young boys.
Stogur an siise agus lá daoine eile go méidir be Hobson an duine ba háchtaí meascan IRB ag an am son agus le na haí mel first déimtigh Hobson go mór lei Hairáil siise Holland ó Siomrí Shráid Camden am leitlaí as a póca féin.
But first off, let me introduce our next speaker, and of course, the Secretary of the Fianna Éireann, Madame de Markievicz.
Hang on a minute. If this is a Boy Scouting organisation, there should be no women in the room.
At that first meeting, there was some dissent about the role of Markievicz. There was a real sense that there wasn't a place for a woman in a military organisation. But the reality was the organisation wouldn't have got off the ground without Markievicz. They needed her money and they needed her support.
I can't see how we can accept her financial help and deny her membership, do you?
Can you cook a dinner?
Yes. Can you hit a mark from 100 paces with a revolver? This year has felt the spirit of Catli Ní Húlaháin moving once more through the land. It will take the best and noblest of Ireland's children to win freedom. For the price of freedom is suffering and pain. The spirit of Ireland is free because Ireland's children have never shirked to pay the price. The path to freedom may lead us the same road that Wolfe Tone and Robert Emmet trod. Treading in their footsteps, we will not fear. Working as they worked, we will not tire. And if we must die as they died, we will not flinch. We hear the old and wise on every side, telling us the days of fighting for Ireland are gone forever. It is why it is to the young a nation must look for help, for life itself. Let the youth of Ireland band themselves together in a glorious brotherhood and hope to win independence and freedom for their country. Ireland wants you. Ireland is calling you. Join the Fianna Éireann, the young army of Ireland and help to place the crown of freedom on her head.
Colbert, he became the captain of the first troop, and Céad Slua, and he was one who was, right from the start, he was involved in the training of the Fianna. He was a key person and very much a role model for the other boys.
Name, Colbert. I promise to work for the independence of Ireland, never to join England's armed forces, and to obey my superior officers. Name.
Go leorgan obair bhí bon ag na Fianna. Níor an garíre ach grá obair scoutála bhí siad a fólam cóthaíocht agus léir scálanig mar sin é. Ach bhí drilleála gceist chomá, mar sin bhí gné bhílata san obair ó hús. Agus a sin is dói nach ra an irid sin le gol a sin go dtí cuasaí mílata amachchas amach. A ggéire armach ar bon le trod in ai hasna. Agus bhí na Fianna chun tosa na grúpa eile a dagra go mílata in sin.
It's often seen as being very militant or militaristic, but really it was no more militant than the Baden-Powell Boy Scouts would have been at the time. In all youth organisations at the time, the Boy Scouts, the Boys Brigade and the Fianna Éireann, there was an emphasis on drilling, marching, parades. But where the Fianna Éireann differed was a very strong emphasis put on Irish history, on the Irish language, on Irish culture. Fianna Éireann had their own drama society, they had their own pipe bands, they held their own Irish classes in conjunction with Patrick Pearse. The hope was that it would be an educational movement as well.
In terms of the language, whether it had a huge effect is debatable. When Colbert started the classes in military drill, quite quickly the orders were being given in Irish and everything associated was supposed to be in the Irish language. No matter how hard Colbert studied Irish, most reports would say that he struggled with the language and he hadn't mastered it fully. There was a report at one stage of Waterford members attending a feis ceol, and at the feis there was different tests performed, so I think the Fianna did quite well in military drill. The one place they fell down and the one place the complaint came back was that they weren't very strong on the Irish language.
On chéad lá riamh, bhí ró lárnacha Colbert a bhás is a bharbert na Fianna. Hastal sé go scolanna éagsúla mleá clia, chun leabhart leis na daltaí, agus súlaige buil nua a bhela. Dairí go húntaach leis is scolar le, scoléana, scol nua gáthangach ina raibh Pádraig Mac Piarais sin a cheannarthaí.
You know, you're not the first person to approach me with the idea of a scouting organisation. I recently received a letter from Baden-Powell asking me to help him set up an Irish branch of his Boy Scouts. They were to be drilled by officers of the English Army and inspected by high government and army officials. The latest and most insidious method of recruitment for the British forces.
The boys who join the Fianna make a solemn oath to work for the independence of Ireland and never to join England's armed forces. We wish no boy who does not intend to live up to that declaration to join.
Ach men Eirik. Become a liom muna men ach ein la down. Cú Cullen's words. I care not though I might live but for one day and one night, if only my fame and deeds live after me. In 10 years, these boys will be men. We have the privilege to be in a position where we can mould their lives to noble ends. I do not mean that we've ever carried out anything like political or revolutionary propaganda among our boys, but simply that we have always allowed them to feel that no one can finally live who hoards life jealously.
Is cinnte go raibh cuid is na tuairimí céanna ag na Fianna agus ag Pádraig Mac Piarais an uair sin, mar de lesprid an lécha se churchan cín I measc na nóg. Bhí na Fianna agus an Piarais ag iarraig ar na buachalaí féchann siar sa bhéalidas agus ahris dhéanamh na fianna a bhfuin le fianna cúil fadó, mar sin bhíon ideolaíocht chéanna ó ina hánta san cheap páirc má Piers Con Colbert mar bhúnteoir corpadachas is gá léana agus chaisi sin nasciidir an dá luisiú chomá.
We could do with a good man like yourself here, Con. The boys need a good drill instructor. And you could set up a branch of the Fianna here. How would you feel about joining us here at St. Enda's? We couldn't afford to pay you very much.
I'd be more than happy to come on board, Mr. Pearce, but I wouldn't dream of taking any money from the school. Being part of the great work you do here is reward enough.
Good man, Con. Good to have you.
Thank you, sir.
Con Colbert was the games master and the physical instructor. He was the kind of the drilling master, and he was responsible for the physical education of the boys. There's a photograph of Colbert in the school gymnasium. It's around 1909, and Colbert is in a Fianna uniform. He's wearing a kilt, and the boys are in kilts, and they're doing these kind of calisthenic exercises.
Tríd an scoil bhí sin an daoine arcó so róla i dró na Fianna, agus bhí sé arndal san ag arcó daoine á dógáil agus á dréáil, agus sul le raibhéine eile ag smaoineamar tríláil scuile gunnaí agus mar sin dá bhí siad instant Fianna ag déanamh le héad agus Colbert go mór chun tosaigh mar dhéann sé stadéir ar na leabhar mílite ag de chuid arm hasna na manuals tréála.
There was an intense rivalry between the Baden-Powell Boy Scouts that had just started in Dublin and na Fianna Éireann. The Baden-Powell Scouts would have marched behind the British Union flag, would have sung God Save the King. The Fianna Éireann quite often would get into fist fights with these Boy Scouts, and the trophy these boys from the Fianna would like to bring home was usually a Baden-Powell Scout hat.
Clear a halt! That flag is the flag of a foreign invader and should not be flown in our country. Dana, close ranks!
Cuir tús le Fianna Éireann im leat lia sa bhliain 1909, agus is geargar scapan glúiseacht go Corcaigh, Limnach, Béal Ferriste, Port Láirge a scofadó bhaile le Glasgow agus learfol hasanna fiú. Bhí ról lárnach ag an glúiseacht seo in luain óg poblachtánaigh a arcú as a réiteach a gcóir na réabhlóide.
In 1910 and 1911, as the Fianna is spreading throughout Ireland, Ard Eisnar are held, basically, nationwide meetings of members of Fianna Éireann. Initially, when the Fianna is quite small, the meetings are held in Countess Markovich's house. But as they grow larger, the meetings are being held in places like the Mansion House in Dublin. And if you look at photographs from that time, at those meetings were Count Colbert, Countess Markovich, Liam Mellows, Bulmer Hobson, many of the leading revolutionaries that took part in the 1916 Rising.
Bhí ról ríthábhachtach ag Bulmer Hobson in abheoch an IRB. Agus faoi 1912 bhí sé héin agus fearr nós Tom Clark agus Sean McDearmadta freigrach as cro omláin nua a chur ar an ráithreachas, a bhí faoi seo ina grúpa ceart mílite. Dahan Hobson nach raibh aon grúpa níos fearr na Fianna chun iluainn a chur ar glúin nua den IRB.
Gives us something concrete to attach the ideas to. Makes a big difference. We push it through. John Daly saw it through. It's on his land as well.
He's a good man for that. Sean, there's someone I need you to meet.
Con! This is Sean Houston. Sean, great to finally meet you.
Con, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, you know Bulmer Hobson.
Mr. Hobson.
Sean, welcome.
Cig Bulmer Hobson go bhéad faoi daoine maithe daoine irónacha den IRB a ahand tríd a Fianna, agus ní a bhada an son gur bhainnig sé cearcail faoi le don na Fianna laistigh den IRB.
Really great to hear that.
Colbert would have been one of the first to be brought in, and Houston was brought in as well at an early stage. From 1912, what you've got is pretty much all of the senior officers within the Fianna around the country are members of the IRB.
Thug siad ard mhór ar na Fianna. Bhuaine siad ceorcail ar leas na Fianna agus buí Colbert bhí geannas ar an gceorcail sin bhí sé sin sa bráthachas faoin am seo.
I, Sean Houston, do solemnly swear in the presence of Almighty God.
The Fianna Circle of the IRB is known as the John Mitchell Literary and Debating Society. The way the IRB operated was in a Fianna Slua in Dublin, somebody would be identified as a potential member. That name would then be brought back by the IRB member, and Colbert would then have to bring that to a meeting of the centres of the IRB in Dublin. If you have 600 members in Dublin, that all 600 IRB members would be exposed to the name of the potential member. And it means that if there's any problems, if this guy's a drinker, if he's been involved in crime, if there's a potential that he could be a spy for the British, it would be quite easily found out about.
Tríd son bhí Colbert ag Garco, tríd na Fianna daoine maithe I dro an IRB. Agus rud ar fad a bhíonn san IRB, cuiseadh Puritánach a bhí ag fós leis an glúiseach nua mar derme fí cheanna sultan líide Tomás Ó Cléirigh agus bhí Colbert lárnach in san letógáil sin agus bhí sin níos lárnaí fós cén ná lútar mór anfaoi mar bhí sé an talamhan dá mar fad ag déanamh na hebrid na dais sin. Ag tréáil na daoine son.
It's interesting for a younger generation that they seem to have a very strong sense of moral purpose as well as being political activists and being very influenced by some of the contemporary international trends with regard to a disillusionment with a generation of parliamentary representatives. You can see this in the lead up to the First World War, a certain devotion to the idea that each generation has to prove itself, and that the way this generation is going to prove itself is by making huge sacrifices.
Very important. We're going to try again. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So you have an Irish version of what's going on internationally. And the impetus behind that, and the idea of noble self-sacrifice, but also discipline and militarisation, and imbuing a younger generation of males with the notion of commitment to a higher ideal. But there has to be a practical side to that, and that practical side has to be the ability to drill, to know how to bear arms and what to do with them, to be fixed on that purpose and on that notion of being prepared to again follow this development to its logical conclusion.
How about these then?
They're doing all right.
Put them on the 7-4.
Rain coming in. We should bring the second gang up here next week. Well, talk to me, Hall, about getting uniforms for some of these lads.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, some of the stuff is shocking. Stay with it.
You boys, who gave you permission to camp here?
Fuck, you have to go in the lane, just me and Lynn. It's Lynn on their shot.
What is that? This is private property. I'm calling the police.
Oh, me smoke you had to come fain. Agus my chumra di gwael. A van shot, now will a gutsa, asnach. My chumra di gwael. I talk a bio bocht, ig fulang on smacht gal, len a cage of blinte.
Listen to me, you blaggass. Clear off at once or I call the police.
Ni hegamu, asnach.
Stop that gibberish. I'm calling the constable.
Immiglat the hasnach! Immiglat! Immiglat!
Are you sure that was wise? Some of these younger lads won't be up for a tussle with the peelers.
These boys are the sons of men who have had the superiority of Englishmen preached to them from their earliest years. Men who have known nothing but failure and defeat. That the Irish went forth to battle, but always fell. We need to show them there's another way. That we are more than our fathers.
Is cinnte go raibh tácht faoi lethe buint leis fianna chun daoine éluaint agus chun síms náisiúnachas a bhúscailt I meascán an óg. Is dóil an gréise ag géirí dal an lec leis an aspa féin bheas a bhí ag muintre na hÉireann ag an am. Agus buinte sé sin ar lí leis an dromheas a bhí ag muintre na bratainna ortha, buineann déarthach scoláirí an iar choilínachais chuma, go muineann sé leis an tlí ina gahan cóchtaí móra leis na daoine a bhíon á rialú a có. Agus ar lí is féidir íireacht a aithint an sons na fianna agus a scoléanna meas a chothú a measc muintre na hÉireann a gáir a fear na hÉireann a chuirt le tuiscin dóibh gur féidir le specht chur féin agus gur féidir le bheith éfachtach agus gan áras gur féidir le siar seo bhaint amach.
England has no business in this country at all. Ireland belongs to the Irish. Our forefathers believed this and fought for it. Hugh O'Donnell, and Hugh O'Neill, Rory O'More and Owen Roe O'Neill, Tone and Emmett and Davis and Mitchell. What was true in their time is still true. Ireland belongs to the Irish.
These boys were being taught to look up to previous martyrs to the cause, to look up to Wolfe Tone, to look up to Robert Emmett in particular because he was so young. They're being, these are seen as role models for these boys.
The brave Irish who rose in 98 and 67 went down because they were not soldiers. Now, we will train to be soldiers. We follow the words of Thomas Davis, who said that righteous men must make our land a nation once again.
These boys were being groomed, basically groomed to kill and be killed. And that is, if you look at the propaganda that these boys were being fed, that is exactly what was happening.
We will train to be pure, truthful, honest, clean in heart as well as in body. Neart in our lava, Firna in our jangacha, agus Dlanna in our gliha.
Colbert had a lot of personal discipline in the sense that, he didn't drink. He felt it was very important that you should keep yourself very clean and lead a very moral life. So he was involved right from the start and very much a role model for the other boys.
The brave Irish who rose in 98 and 67 went down because they were not soldiers.
In terms of his personality, Colbert would have been quite straight-laced. He was deeply religious, and he always emphasised to his men that the three causes which had led to the failure of previous Irish rebellions were lack of discipline, and that he claimed led to drinking, and in turn with that, loose talk. So he was a teetotaler and didn't smoke either.
The object of Na Fianna Éireann is to train the boys of Ireland to fight Ireland's battles when they become men.
Ochtú go 8 sé raig, bhí iirechtaí a bheith aontaachta go háirithe aontaachta goigála chorannaigh an rialtas dúchais. Bheith an tríú beal rialtas dúchais ag teachtas cór Parliamente. Bhain amsá bhí 8 na Parliamente I bhaim, 8 chur srían le cócht teach na Dearnaí, agus bhí ar an chumar an scéal go bhéadach teach na Dearnaí muile chur an mille ach nach bhéad bhí stoppa chur leis. Mar sin bhí sim bhí an tuairimid formhór bhaint na hÉireann go raibh rithean ráis ag an mille rialtas dúchais.
Irish society at the time and Irish politics was fairly highly militarised. This militarisation had started with the Ulster Volunteer Force in the north.
Well, a walked your go to share I vi irchti I of gent of the holle vannacht faoi imprucht na Bratana. Bei Sean Trace behoofd riamh an imprucht sin. Agus barlo gomór ve buintach le imprucht glorver shachas ve faoi Parliament viog in la clia.
Bulmer Hobson and those in the IRB said that this was fantastic because the Ulster Unionists had armed in opposition to Home Rule. It was now the Republicans' chance to use those arming for Home Rule as a springboard from which to launch a revolution.
Leis an róla bhí agus an IRB, bhí neart blianta caite ag Bulmer Hobson ag legan bunchloch le haig airm do óglaigh náisiúnta. Agus bheith ról lárnach ag fianna éireann san mílíste náisiúnach sin a bhaint amach. I ré saoire na bliana 1930, cúpla mí sulla gcuirg tús leis na hóglaigh. Chuir Hobson fis ar bhuail sínsracha na Vienna, Con Colbert agus Sean Houston in a másc, chun an próséas a hosnú agus dúrláil rúnda a chur ar bhuail an IRB.
Bunny a bhóg lína héireann na 1930 mar bhí an chosalacht ar an scéal gur a neamhspláchas na héireann faoi wagart hí óglaí, ulla, bunny le chuir an éis sin agus cheap náisiúntóirí go mo cheart óglaí a bhunú leis an neamhspláchas a chosint.
Eyes on this bucher. Porrick, Liam.
Well, lads, it's done. Next Thursday night at Rotunda, we're announcing the formation of the new volunteer movement. I'd like your support. Will you be there?
Absolutely, we'll bring some of the older Fianna boys as well.
Ach, ag is tréimhse seo níra an pírsach, níra sé páirteach amrárachas do poblachta go fóil. Thosa sé a bogus a tró sin, achas léir go raibh cóa folatúil idir Colbert agus Mac Pearse ag is tréimhse seo cínta.
I don't think that the Pearse brothers know who's pulling their strings.
We'll all be on the same page in due course.
Well, Hamburg, Karen.
There's a St Enda's event, a fete or a school day out in Jones's Road, which is now, of course, Crook Park. And Pearse is watching the St Enda's senior boys marching, and he's very impressed by their military formation and the neatness of their turns and how good they are. And he remarks to Colbert that he's very impressed that with so little training that they could produce this level of discipline. And Colbert, as Ryan observes, Colbert looks away in kind of contempt to say, you don't know what's going on, because Pearse doesn't realise that Colbert is drilling these boys in his spare time.
We were way down in the Vienna IRB Mitchell Circle with Colbert and Bulmer Hobson and Sean Houston and all the rest. Colbert was drilling us in the Foresters' Hall up in Parnell Square. So Pearse was very tickled when he did find out, because in due course Hobson and Colbert sounded us. So they said, what about Pearse? And they sounded us. Well, they soon got in touch with Pearse, Hobson in particular.
Near an Pearse's in Harpies, near Hicksher, kind of go out show her bun. I can now marry her son. So, Baril there, go out Agric, Don Dogoyle, I can IRB. I guess every three Bulmer Hobson and a Lornock, that's up.
Nor a bunny up Oakley na Héireann na 1930 hí Colbert an guste sealadach a chuirsiad ar bun leis an agriocht a riara. Agus is dói nuair a chosa an náisiúnachas míleta a fás, gur leiise le rééisiln gomach ionad an suntasach san obair sin ag na Fianna agus daoine mar Colbert a bhí páirteach iontu.
You also have a clear link between the Fianna and the Irish Volunteers. There's a policy put in place that when Fianna boys reach the age of 18 and there isn't an officer position available for them in the Fianna, that they transfer to the Irish Volunteers. And of course that was really valuable to the Volunteers because these boys already had military training.
By the time of the 1916 Rising, Con Colbert and Sean Houston were still involved with na Fianna, but really had moved on to take a part in the Irish Volunteers, the adult organisation. Con Colbert was captain of F Company 4th Battalion of the Irish Volunteers, and Sean Houston was captain of D Company 1st Battalion.
Bhí sé Colbert tamil rivan éireamach go raibh trod ar a meallach, agus thosa sesin ag uló. Thosa sé rá le Fianna go mé chearcó péna bheith ré le troids. Thosa sé I déanna fearra ar ionad arm na Breataine. Thosa sé I déanna steidir ar chórsaí míleta. I gcíre bar feabhse chuir ar a chumas féin is na chórsaí sin.
Two things which are very important in triggering the Rising. Number one is the war in Europe. that England's difficulty was Ireland's opportunity, the old Fenian saying. And they felt that the Boer War had given them a similar opportunity and it hadn't been taken up. Another thing was that that generation felt very much there was a burden on them. And they felt really that if Pearson, his comrades and Connolly didn't act, that was it. They would have missed their chance and the young men of Ireland would simply enlist in the British Army without any protest being made and would have shed their blood in Europe rather than, as the Republicans felt, the fight should have been at home.
The idea that Ireland was in a pre-revolutionary situation in the run-up to 1916 Rising is simply not true. This was very much a minority, and the Rising was organised by a minority within a minority. So you're really dealing with a relatively small group of people. And it's interesting that Desmond Fitzgerald suggested that it was the mood of despair within Irish nationalism that propelled those who became involved in the 1916 Rising, that they were looking around at a society that they knew was not wedded to the ideals or the ambitions that they were wedded to. Therefore, they had to do something quite desperate in order to try and change that, in order to try and transform attitudes, perhaps believing that by making this gesture, by making these sacrifices, that they could ultimately influence public opinion and change public opinion.
In nomine Patri, et Filii, et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen.
Sna seachtaí rivan éirí amach, capach Count Colbert in a garda cosanta ag Padraig McPeirish. A cé go raibh Colbert ag obair taobh lo siúd a bhí ag agrú na réabhlóide, ní cosúil go raibh éon chur amach aige ar na pleananna a bhí an mar túcha. Nuair a fuair Colbert an scéile go raibh an slógal a bheith ar bun dánach cásca, dúirt sé fiú mar a deochad na hóglaí amach go dtitach sé héin na sasanna ag ina éonar.
Your fella's in here tonight, Ned.
I reckon there's a few faces, all right. See Willie Pearce up there?
Spot McDermott is below. Will you give us a song tonight, Ned?
I might. This fella loosens up.
It's not right. Having a Kaylee during Lent?
Well, dance while you can, Con. Or you might be dancing at the end of a rope one of these days.
The sacrifice will be worth it.
Aríonn an chéasta, dúirt Colbert le Robert Holland las cheannasaí chomhlach na nóglach, go mbeadh an chéad slóga eile ar an gceann deirg, agus a chinntú go bhaidh na fearar fad faoistin roimh ré. Ach nuair a dúirdigh MacNeil an éirí amach a chur ar ceall, hit an táin as planana na nóglach. Ar a séach legar maidin, dánach cásca, chug Colbert ardúd as na fear fannacht sa bhaile, go dtí go bhaidís de héile trórach.
James Conley.
Luan Cásca chua Colbert go cearnóg íochlas ina sa gantar go bhlád líar a sé gobarán. Bhí Cathlan éman cheanta slóga an sin.
Most of the garrisons around the city for Easter week had Fianna members there. So you have the younger boys are involved as scouts and as dispatch carriers. You also have, just as more rank and file fighters, those who are in their late teens, early 20s, who are in combat roles, some of them as leaders, and we would think of Colbert and Houston in that sense.
Okay, I need you to take 5, best man.
Sin curma bhí ar Colbert. Grúdlan Watkin is sráid á airdia a gháil. Go bhéadach a fórsa an sin súla chuineáil ar clúiseachtaí ar na Breataine agus stoppa chuir leob a marshal I dro lár na carach. Ní ran Colbert agus a chuid fear róáda in Grúdlan Watkin mar beléir nach ra mórán le déana ag nach ra éíocht de siúla arm na Breataine a heachta bailach sin. Rinne sé íireachta go le dangáil le éman cant agus scéal áldhaid ach ní éire leis. Ar sin chúise go dtí Druglan Jameson in Aciláve áit ra fórsa láidir agus fórsa bhí níos cuide go heach na mocht áit ra canta troid agus bhí an cá harta ar lán a bhuiad a an áit ra an Druglan sin bhí se bhád níos géire. Go gcuird héisce Colbert a hecht go dtí an Druglan lán a bhuiad a bhí ionsaí ó na Breataine, chola siad saidirí teime an Druglan agus chu sé bhaim ar roioine go mór an chuí ar ragar Colbert an sonsaí seo. Chu sé héan go bhfada leis mála, cha sé Grenádí hartarm agus chuir sé sin cúil ar na saidirí. A sin amach baléir is dóigh amach sesin a gceannas ar na fórsaí sa Druglan, maiall ar an éifeachta bhíige i gcúrsaí míleta.
Fuin déir daon, hímpelig fórsaí hasanna garastún Colbert, agus scarag amach iad don chuideile den chathair. Ach bhí siomh na rebelúnach i lán a bhuireá, daingnithe go láidir, agus chuinnig na fear misnach, cé go raibh siad de gairí níos uaigní, agus cé go raibh solas na dinte le feiceáil is scapa trasna na catharach.
Baléir nach raibh teagháil leanúnach idir an éad na raibh Colbert. Egan am sin agus an ceannas an bricáid ar ceap Colbert agus na daoine bhíon na cheanta go raibh gairí go gealló go raibh gachrod chun a lasa go raibh bé plan all war a bhí ann go raibh gairí leis.
By Friday evening, Saturday morning, a lot of the British Army had actually withdrawn from their area, hadn't been able to overrun it, and Colbert still hadn't received the news that the other Republican garrisons had surrendered. The Marrowbone Lane garrison, which Colbert was in charge of, was actually planning a victory, Cayley, for holding out 1 week on the Sunday night.
The British are pulling back! The Germans can't be far from Dublin now! We are winning, and nothing else matters! Yes! Now, the country volunteers have led the way. They have beaten the British in Athlone, Limerick, Galway, and have only to hammer the troops in the Curragh camp. There can't be many more left. Are ye ready to fight to the last man? Yes! Right. Now.
Ní a sacb ceir de bhí tarlú sa go déalach an chathair garíre, bhí ráflaí le tlostal in a meas gur éirí amach ar fud na tíre, gur a dhearbán a tíocht amach a cuidzú lob agus mar sin é. Agus dar leob bejaag amach an bua acab. Nuair a tháinig an scéile go raibh fórsaí na poblachta i ggéile, ba mhór an chéim siar go lucht lán a bhuireá ar fad, ach Colbert hain is léir go raibh sé creatsa go mór.
What's happening?
Captain Colbert, as Commandant of the 4th Battalion, I am here to inform you that our Commander-in-Chief has agreed to a ceasefire, and that you must hereby lay down your arms and surrender. Assemble the men in the garrison as soon as you can. We are to surrender unconditionally.
News came through that the country was up, that the British Army was finished.
We haven't had the support of our people that we expected. Our cause is to be postponed to a future generation. Oral Watain.
Pred sé gur an bua go pred sé gur na daine an taobh agus an sin fór sé amach gur siad gairí as gur fórsaí na Breataine ar roláidir acu nach bhuair siad takeíocht orlehan ó winter na carach agus gur siad anis le na gcuid gunaí a chahabhab agus a bheith faoi glas ag gnáhid. Tugad Colbert agus the príosún eile go dtí Barrack Richmond in Inchachód. Bhí aithne anmhaire Colbert arrogantar sin mar bhí sé gníomhachan sin leis na fianna. Ach bhí na slúte an le fanóda dhéana faoin na rebelliúnaí, le measlaí thuairscób, le seilach a leob agus mar sin é. Agus cuid gan na daine seo bhí aithne Colbert orb agus bhain sé siar go móras nach raibh an pobl bail leis, nach raibh an pobl sásta híocht amach agus rá grein ceart acu. Go raibh siad a tíocht amach le aontúil le arm na Breataine.
Third row, third from the right.
You, get up. Go to the back of the hall.
Cuid gan na príosúnaí Barrack Richmond, bhí siad éireach go maith, bhí cuid acu sásta leis an obair bhí ar seoil, cuid acu níor sacu céir de bhí an róbach bhí siad sásta lecha leis a gcinúnt. Colbert áfach, bhí dímá uásach ir, dúirt sé le daoine go mear leis básáil seachas a bheith bríosún.
Cornelius Colbert, you are charged with taking part in an armed rebellion and in the waging of war against His Majesty the King. Such act being of such a nature as to be calculated to be prejudicial to the defence of the realm and being done with the intention and for the purpose of assisting the enemy. How do you plead?
Not guilty.
Let the record show that the accused...
Bhí tríal mhíle Colbert eisteach ar chopla bailach. Bhí fianna se uásach a tugad isteach an aghaidh. Fianna se dúirt go raibh sé an áiteile a gahar ar fad. Ach ní rá, nuair a dír an chóirtear an raibh sé gur aon teórá dúirt sé nach raibh.
I have nothing to say.
Is léir go raibh sé creat a fós, go raibh sé ag gcúra deireadh chuir leis an tromlaí seo ar fad a bhí ar ón ggéala le.
Fuarthas Colbert ceantach agus deireadh chun báid sé. Tugad go Barrack Richmond go dtí príosún Kilviney agus ar an 7 lá de bhí bealtaine, dúrag leis go mbeadh sé ar aghaidh na biléir an bhaideann dar gcionn. An uíthí sin, scríoh sé litreacha ag fágáil sláán na Ghaelta is lena cháide, a grifuair Leila ina measc.
My dear Lila, I did not like to call you to this gale to see me before I left this world, because I felt it would grieve us both too much. So I am just dropping you a line to ask you to forgive me anything I do owe you, and to say goodbye to you and all my friends, and to get you and them to say a prayer for my soul.
Round to where Angarek no one walked to bed Mokuro no one walked to Gile August August gave them
God has given me the grace to know when I'm to die. Perhaps I'd never get the chance of knowing when I was to die again, and so I'll try and die well. May God help us, me to die well, you to bear your sorrow. I'll pray for you all, so also you pray for me. I am your loving brother, Con.
Oh, vi me Angarek Agus honig me fade the Oh, honig me agus scéif na mana. Hánig mé an dúal Bachúbras babilse agus hánig mé dá Valentín agus ní si clí